Coming up, the sweet taste of victory. The Brooklyn Nets get the first win of the season in their home opener in front of the home crowd at the Clays. We break it all down, including the big performance from Cam Thomas. Coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms and let you know that you can continue to win big on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, where we get started is a 115-102 dominant performance. I'm going to call it wire to wire, even though the Nets trailed at several portions of this game. Just a really good, fun vibe for what is going to be a long season in their home opener, home crowd. Jordi Fernandez's first victory. It was what a great night for a Sunday night for the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, you'll take it, man. The first win of the season. I know the tank has been, the modus operandi of like what the team is trying to do this season. And if they play hard and win some games here or there, cool. Like we'll take it. Sunday night, first game at home, be able to beat the Bucks. No one likes Giannis if you're like a part of the Brooklyn contingent. So if you can, and by the way, Nets own the Bucks pick. So any time they can just like shoot the Bucks a loss, we'll take that also. It does help too if you're just thinking way ahead to the draft. This is exactly, I think, the kind of brand of Nets basketball we're going to get this year. Jordi Fernandez has them playing really hard. They are a pretty fun team when it gets dialed up. I still do not think that they are candidates to win a lot of games. And if wins come in here and there in fun ways and they keep it competitive, that's kind of all you can ask for from the Nets season. And I think we've seen that through the first game. And they deserve to win this game. Like they played really, really well.
The other part of it, at a high level before we get into Cam Thomas, Dennis Schröder, this little backcourt duo that's been doing some incredible things, including making history on opening night at Barclays as well for the franchise, it's so funny in a year, as you said, when you know that the Nets are going to more than likely lose a lot of basketball games. And there's going to be players on this team that are there now that aren't going to be there after the deadline. This is such a more enjoyable watch, though, than it was a year ago. Even at the start of last season, when you had players and you had an agenda of wanting to make the play-in tournament, wanting to make the playoffs, coaching-wise, scheme, fit, all of those things, when you turned on a game last season, Doug and I talked about this on the podcast, it was, gosh, this is a brutal watch. It just doesn't seem like they have a plan, or it doesn't seem like these guys can function inside of the plan they want to execute. The Nets are still going to lose a lot of games this year, but even in the first three, outside of, I'd say, 2 quarters against Orlando, quarter and a half, 2 quarters, 8 out of 10 quarters, this team's been fun to watch, high energy, defensively minded, driven, aggressive, and then you get a lot of great performances on the offensive end. So hopefully the fan base can enjoy a win like this, knowing that it's going to be a long season. I just think it's been a much different team to watch coming into this year than it was a year ago.
No doubt about it. Like they seem to have a clear plan. Frankly, the players just play hard. I think we questioned that at times last year where there was just no effort.
Yeah.
And you could tell there was no effort when they're losing to teams like Memphis and Charlotte, who are also bottom of the barrel, and losing games where where the Nets were actually trying to win. Right.
Yes.
Those other teams were in the tank. The Nets are actually still trying and still losing. It's the opposite scenario this year where you'll take the losses, but they're actually going out there and playing pretty hard. If you look at and we're going to get into this game specifically, a lot of the cool stuff, but just on a high level, right now, the Nets are the 5th best. It's only 3 games. Nets have the 5th best point differential in the East. Like they are, just because even the losses kept pretty close. This one, they take, everyone will clearly say the Bucks are a more talented team with Giannis and Dame and stuff, right? For the rest of the season, you would take the Bucks a million times out of a million.
Right.
But when you're able to just like show energy, show a plan, have sort of like a semblance of a hierarchy within the offense and know what it is you're trying to execute on a, possession by possession basis. And like I said, just the effort. These guys picked up full court like at times during the game in the NBA, and it worked. Like, this stuff doesn't really, like, you don't see. That's just, to me, was like this Jordi Fernandez thing is like, yeah, you have Zaire Williams picking up Dame full court in the 3rd quarter. On a team that's projected to win 18 games. Like there's just something happening there that is coaching and effort and all this other stuff. And again, like not to not lose the thread here, but it just speaks to like sort of an attitude adjustment that I think we've seen under Jordy Fernandez through the first 3 games of the season.
No, 100%. And there are a few new faces. And then there's also a lot of veterans that you ask to come in, be professional, do your jobs. And we expected at least Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson, right? Dennis Schröder is like a perfect player to have on your team when you want to be a possession to possession, intensity minded, focused, every single play counts type of roster. You need a handful of veterans like this that can instill into the young guys as well. So 115-102, as we said, this is a game that Claxton, by the way, we'll get into him a little bit more on tomorrow's episode. Nets won't play again until Wednesday. But Claxton said at halftime, which I just thought was telling before we get into Thomas and Schröder here. They asked, Megan Triplett asked him at halftime, how do you think you did? Yeah, we had a good first half, paraphrasing. But we had good first halves against Orlando and against Atlanta, and we lost those games. So you could also see, hey, first 2 games, yeah, we felt good about things 24 minutes through, but now we need to get through the next 24 to get a win. And against a team like the Bucks, I think there's also something in just coming out and giving a team that has a long-term championship agenda a bit of a gut check where it's hard. And we've talked about this over the years. When you're not expected to win a game or be competitive even, the other team throttles down a little bit. You just don't approach it the same way because it's the Brooklyn Nets and they have 18.5 over-under win total. So maybe we don't need to treat them a certain way. And when you try to ratchet it back up, sorry, that team, the Brooklyn Nets, is already operating 10 to 15 miles an hour faster than you, and it's hard to close that gap. So really impressive win for the Brooklyn. And go ahead, yeah.
One thing you're going to see too, I think that teams are probably going to notice, at least as long as the veterans are on the team and this team is the version of it is. One, again, the veterans have something to play for here. They either probably want to find themselves in new situations, and playing hard now, gives them a better chance at showing up in the playoffs for another team later on in the year. But what you also see from this team, I think, because they have an elite scorer, we're going to talk about Cam Thomas in a second, because they have at least one elite scorer in the team and another guy who can kind of like point general the thing. We'll talk about the backcourt, is that you really aren't going to be able to take your foot off the gas because they have combinations that can give you problems if you think you're just going to take it easy. Again, they are not candidates to go 500 this year, but the way the team is constructed, they are candidates to make it very annoying for teams for a while, right? Still early in the season. Let's get 20 losses under our belt and see if everyone has the same fire. But right now, this version of the team is definitely not a team that other teams should take lightly, because just having one guy that can catch fire and 5 guys that can give you real problems on the defensive end is a team that you just can't think you're going to cakewalk through it and get an easy W. And I think that's going to be like sort of the promise of the next season.
Cam Thomas, how about this coming up in a second? Another 30-point performance. Yeah, he did that, 32. But how about just being, among the league leaders in scoring? We talk about his game through these first 3 and specifically in this win coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Look, you're trying to get tickets, whether it's to the game, whether it's to the concert, the theater, the comedy show. You got to get tickets. You want to make sure you're going to see what you can sit down. You want to get that live event action going. It's one thing to watch things on television, like the NBA game, the NHL. It's one thing to watch on television. Go and see it live, folks. Totally different experience. This is where Gametime can help you get in on the action. You're going to get the best deals around. You're going to get those super deals. You're going to be able to see exactly what you're going to see from your seat before you even sit down. They got the lowest price guarantee as well. If you go over to Gametime right now, you got so many different offerings. You got World Series tickets. Ever heard of it? World Series tickets over there in New York. It's a little pricey, but again, this is a World Series. This is maybe once in a lifetime kind of thing. You can get those tickets going over at Gametime. They got Texans coming in to play the Jets, starting at $21. $21 for a football game live. It's all there for you over on Gametime. Look, it's so easy. You're going to download the Gametime app. You're going to create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, of course, talking about the 115-102 victory for the Brooklyn Nets home opener, first win of his NBA coaching career for Jordy Fernandez. A really fun scene in the locker room after the game as well. Like, you mentioned there in the first segment, just quickly before we get into Cam Thomas, these moments are really fun. And whether or not they can maintain this intensity and this drive when you're 15, 20 games in the season and the record is more reflective of where we think the talent level is, that's TBD. But it was really cool just to see that moment where everybody was as excited, or maybe even more excited than Jordy Fernandez was, that he got his first win. Cam Thomas, on the other hand, this guy's always excited.
Maybe.
And by the way, his attitude and demeanor in post-game interviews is completely different this year than it was a season ago. Had a smile on his face, talking really glowingly about what the team is working on, what he's doing individually. He gives you another 30-plus point performance, 32 in this one. He goes 10 of 21 from the field. So, again, just a hair below 50%. And also does what he started to do in game number 2. First game of the season, only got to the line once. 8 trips the next game, 11 in this one, attacking downhill. And I'm going to jump right to the end of this story real quick, Doug, because there was points in this game where multiple possessions, back to back to back, Giannis was switching on and guarding Cam Thomas out on the perimeter. And Cam Thomas was saying, hey, I'm going to put some moves on you and try to drive the lane and get to the bucket. Like, everything you wanted from Cam Thomas in terms of production, scoring, the overall game, and then that belief that I am on the level of superstar, lengthy, bigger defender than me. I'm going to go ahead and attack him as well. What a great game for Cam.
He was awesome. He was awesome. This is what I mean about, like, if you have this kind of efficient scorer and you can put defense around him, it's going to be hard for other teams if he starts, like, sort of having Cam Thomas like games. The numbers have been sick so far this year: 48% from the field, 46 from 3, 90 from the line. Okay. And by the way, that's on more shots than last year. So he's higher field goal percentage so far on almost 22 shots a game. He only took 18 a game last year. Not almost 9 3-point attempts a game right now. He had 6 last year. He's shooting 46%. And then he's getting to the line per minute about the same, but he's making more. So again, small sample size, but this is also a guy we already know can score. So it's like, is it going to be sustainable for the whole course of the season? Probably not totally. I mean, some of those numbers are probably going to end up being close. And so if you're going to generate good looks, which they're mostly doing for him, where they have sort of a more of an offensive identity around how they're running the offense in terms of getting him into actions, into like, they're getting him into coming off pin downs and then being able to either put up shots or be able to beat a primary defender. He got trapped a couple times, worked his way out of it, recognized the bigger defender he can try to get by. And we already know he's one of the better guys in the league at drawing contact near the rim and finishing, like, because he's so strong. These numbers are sustainable. He's 6th overall in scoring through 3 games. We knew that he was going to be in and around that range already. Guys above him, maybe you've heard of these guys. Tell me if you have. Maybe you're new to the game. Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Maxey, Trae Young, Cam Thomas. That's the list through 3. Yeah,
sounds like a player.
Look, the Nets, they didn't sign him to the extension. We'll see where that lands. He's done every single thing you would want him to do to start the season. Every single thing. And he should have more assists. Like, they have not counted some assists for him, and they just had guys that just weren't able to finish. I think the assist numbers are going to climb. So it's just been everything and more. He's been awesome. And just sort of point stop. He's been great.
There's a couple, yes, 100%. There's a couple of key moments here. One, which was the classic, as we've talked about before. When we think about the ornithology of Cam, you talk about him out at the top of the key. He got the pass, well, forget who it was coming up. It's basically getting into a half-court set. So he sees the defender start to take about 3 steps towards the perimeter. He goes, okay, I'm going to go ahead and blow by you. Now I'm working towards the paint. Next defender might have been Giannis. He goes, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and drive around you. Now I'm going to go ahead and take contact, fade off of the baseline, which was like that perfect contortion of body control, and hit a little runner along the baseline, which I thought was fantastic. And then, as you mentioned, crediting for assists where crediting for assists are due, he intentionally, fully, as you watch the replay, drives into the paint, finds Nick Claxton, working the baseline, and lobs it off glass. Full intention. I'm going to lob this thing off glass for Nicholas Claxton to throw it down. They didn't give him credit in the game. I'm sure we will get that on the back end. And just to your point, listen, we said coming to the year, you want to see the expansion of his game. How much will we see the opportunities for him to be a facilitator or not? But when you look, it's almost funny. He has 2 assists in this game. He had 3 in the previous 2 individually as well. And it's actually really encouraging, because there's been a number of sequences when you would say, hey, made the right play, found the right shooter, open look, didn't go down, right? Good process, bad result. There's this world where over the next 5 to 6 games, if he keeps playing like this, if the team keeps playing like this, we'll also be looking back and saying, yeah, he's giving you 27 to 30+ point performances and also 4 or 5 assists per game, which would represent at that point Just stop having the debate or conversation about what his game is or what he can be. Like, he is just an elite scorer at the NBA level who's also starting to take the next growth step in terms of identifying defenses and punishing them, not just through his own game, but through setting up others with wide open looks. Because now we're getting into that territory where it's the gravity of his game makes up others.
And I don't think we've seen examples too of like he's taking 21.7 shots a game. I wouldn't put too many of them in like the shot chucker territory either, right? Like I don't think we've seen this like these
He's
super
only had these couple of 3-pointers towards the end of games. Or against Orlando or maybe against Atlanta, it was like trying to come back. And in this one, it was trying to close it out. But they're not chuckers. They're not chuckers because he makes those shots. And we've now seen him, I think, every single game come down the court and have one of those like pull up. I'm going to kind of lean over the straightaway three and falling into inside the arc. But that's like a part of his repertoire. So I don't even consider those to be chuckers from that distance.
Yeah, I just think there haven't been too many times where I've thought to myself, oh man, that we're just shooting to shoot here, right? I don't think that that's been the case. And so again, we'll see. Again, long season. Let's see what happens over 82. Let's see how, there's going to probably go through some rougher stretches here, but you really can't ask for anything more. And that's even with the understanding that him and Schröder are just like not really perfect complements for each other on the offensive end. They're still not I don't think they're a good backcourt pairing together. Like they're both kind of undersized, right? They both do things completely differently and not in a way that necessarily always complements each other. But it's still, I mean, it's the best. It's really the only backcourt the Nets can like think of working with, right? So I'm not actually even suggesting a change here. And Schröder's been really good too, because we're going to talk about him. He had his own awesome game, but even with that understanding that this isn't like even totally optimized, I think you're still feeling really good about that. And we can get into Schröder now too, because he was awesome in this game also.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. The +9, by the way, right now for Cam Thomas in terms of plus minus on the season. We'll talk about where Schröder stands in that moment as well. And it's funny too, because as we start to lean into where Schröder's game was, which was a half of making history for the Brooklyn Nets, those two players, 25 plus point performances on an opening night for the Brooklyn Nets. First time in franchise history, which, like, think about the backcourts that the Nets have had. I mean, Jason Kidd, even just among them, gives you a sense of players that maybe had that opportunity and just lacking that backcourt companion to go and do it. So another little bit of history made for them as well. But when you think about this combination, I'll say before we talk about the individual performance, it's worth noting that in the 39 minutes that Cam Thomas and Dennis Schröder have shared the court together, and by the way, we'll talk about this on the back end, and Ben Simmons has been off the floor, they're a plus 33. 139 offensive rating. So while they may not be the perfect combination, both these guys are operating at an incredibly high level. What has Dennis Schröder been doing? What have his stats been telling us? And how much can we expect to get in return for him at the trade deadline? We'll get into that coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get into that, I'll tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, no better time to get on the action than right now over on FanDuel. Maybe you're midway through the NFL season here. You're getting started with NBA. You're going to get bet right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. You like that idea? Give yourself a chance to win. Get yourself a chance to get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel Sports app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and the NBA all in one place. Maybe you get that hunch in the middle of the game. Maybe you're watching something, you see something that no one else does. You head over to FanDuel and get yourself started. It's all there for you. You can even still put in a nice little taste on Cam Thomas to lead the league in scoring right now, 6 overall in odds. You like that going? Like we said too, a bunch of nobodies on the list ahead of him. So just go ahead and maybe you just put your belief in one Mr. Cam Thomas for the rest of the season. That's what you can do over at FanDuel. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 real money bet over at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we start to wrap up today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about victory, 115-102 at home against the Milwaukee Bucks. Remember, it's a 1-4 protected for Milwaukee, so depending on how their season goes, maybe we throw them maybe they'll throw a little pick back at Giannis. I don't know. We'll have conversations when we get to the deadline. I don't know how desperate Bucks are going to be. Dennis Schröder also had one heck of a performance for himself, and I mentioned Cam Thomas being +9 to this point of the season. Dennis Schröder is just a gentlemanly +27 on the year, and he comes off a game here against the Milwaukee Bucks where he is such an interesting player in my mind. The Atlanta game only shot 31% from the field. After that, 58% against Orlando, 7-12, and then 8-15, over 50%, 5 of 8 from beyond the arc, 8 of 8 at the line, also kicked in 6 assists along the way. He just falls into, in a 29-point performance, the category of really good player that tons of teams would love to have on their roster, and yet often finds themselves kind of bouncing around the league. I think the Nets are really lucky to have him in this backcourt to start this season off with a lot of young players and different pieces that they're going to be moving around.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a bad team, what you really want to avoid is a Schröder plus 29 on the season too. Is that what you said? Plus 29?
Yeah.
Yeah,
27. Ooh, good correction.
Yeah, the plus 27 just last game. So there,
that's right.
So there you go. Plus
really cleaned up. It was a bit of a slow start for him. Cleaned it up in that final game.
A curse of a bad team is a team that has like a point guard or a guy who controls the ball a lot, who just is out there looking to just get his, and that's going to be kind of the end of the story. Or maybe go like dueling banjos with someone else in the team. So if you think back to like the Kevin Porter, Jalen Green version of the Houston Rockets, you're like, oh, right, baby, what are we doing here? Right? Like it's just this two guys. It's out there. There's no plan. They roll the balls in the court, and we'll see you in 48 minutes. Right? That's kind of like, that was kind of the plan.
Score and outcome of the game be darned.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, whatever, who cares? We'll go out and get ours, and we'll see everyone in the locker room. Like, like that. But that, so if you're a bad team, one thing you can really help yourself, you can still be bad, but you can help yourself in terms like development and just sort of poise. It's funny because like he's got some fire to him, but poise by just having guys who can control the offense, slow things down, aren't going to panic, are going to get good shots, can run pick and roll, can do this stuff that just is sort of like floor raising elements of basketball rather than just going out there and stat padding and making sure and it looks like the summer league. And we've seen versions of this from bad teams in the past. And that's when it starts to look really, really gross. Schröder's just not a candidate for that to happen. And when that's the case, your team is just better for it because he's been around the league for a long time. He's kind of been in every situation at this point, short of like the championships.
Yeah.
And he's gotten paid. Loves basketball, wants to be great. He's played really high on an international level. Has played like in every situation, basically. And that's just like important to have on a team that doesn't project to be very good because it makes it I personally underrated this to start the year, and it's a mistake. It just makes it less likely that you'll be awful, right? And I think like that's what he brings. And it sounds like damning with faint praise, but it's true. He just floor raises in the ways that the Nets really, really need.
And in a different way, obviously, because he plays in the backcourt, it takes nothing away from the veteran experience or the value of like a Cam Johnson, of a Dorian Finney-Smith. Like guys like that, they matter in their own way. You saw, I think it was Cam Johnson had his arm around, along with Schröder, around Cam Thomas, going back maybe to the Orlando game, might have been against the Bucks here on Sunday night. Where it was like Cam was like, "Hey man, like what's going on out here? Like I'm now a 30-point scorer. You can go ahead and give me some of the calls." And you had veterans there be like, all right, it's all good. We're going to get there in the end. But you need the guy that can have the ball in his hands, that can be setting up others and also setting the example. It's worth noting, too, that when there's been a couple of scraps, it's Dennis Schröder. He got whacked in the head last night. Did not appreciate that. Was ready to get into it, even though he looks – it's the equivalent of like me taking on Andre the Giant in a battle when you watch Dennis Schröder want to go toe-to-toe with anybody on the court. But – he was ready to scrap if that's what it was going to take. You saw, no matter what you think about Ben Simmons and his play for the Brooklyn Nets, somebody had a little bit of a passing negative comment for him as they were walking down the tunnel in the Orlando game. It was Dennis Schröder that walked back up and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, what'd you say? Would you like to repeat that to someone's face here?" That mentality is clearly something that you like to have on your roster, and Dennis Schröder just embodies that, and he doesn't do it, by the way, with any sense of false intention. Like, it's like, this is who he is. And when he talked after the game, he likes being in Brooklyn. He loved, they sent his mom and his wife flowers when they first signed him and welcomed him in and all those things. So it's one of those cases where it just feels like it's a really good match here, even in what's going to be a tank season and a rebuilding year for the Brooklyn Nets. Dennis Schroeder's like, hey, I like it. I want to be this for this team right now.
And it'll be interesting what kind of trade market there is for him. If he plays at this level, there will be a team. It's hard to trade for point guards. It's hard to trade for point guards because they're not seamless fits into what every team needs, right? Like, you can trade for 3-and-D wings. You can trade for wing guys because it kind of just doesn't matter what's going to happen. A guy who's a pure one, which is what he is a little harder to graze the ultimate trade value on because most teams have point guards, right? And so
Yeah.
he's not going to just like, he won't swing title odds for a team, let's say. But I could see another situation where a team gets down a point guard and they just want to, they're kind of in for the season and want to make sure that they can like make a playoff run. And they want to put in a guy who actually who will be steady, is not going to need to know the full playbook, and can go in there and just play you like good quality, like I said, steady minutes. And exactly what we're getting. Think about what we saw a few years ago from the Nets when they went after guys like Aldridge and Blake Griffin when they were on that championship run. They're like, hey, it's going to make sense for us to just have guys who the moment won't be too big for them. We know we can put them in. They're not going to be nervous. They're like, like that does count for something later on. It's, again, a little harder around these guys who are smaller point guard types because, who are the teams that are going to really want to go crazy to get them? But for sure, he's going to probably have value to somebody here at the trade deadline if he plays like this, because they'll be able to see it. It's an interesting case. I can't make a case for like going out and trade first round picks for him, but he's made a case that like could be on a decent team as like, backup point guard or something like that. And that has value. Like, I don't know, backup, like, like put him in Dallas instead of Dinwiddie off the bench. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's probably better for them. And so I don't know. It's an interesting spot.
You heard it here first. Dinwiddie reuniting with the Brooklyn Nets at the trade deadline. Care of one Doug Norrie. Yes, the last thing I want to note on here, and I agree with you on Dennis Schröder. It's been really fun to watch him early in the season. We're going to talk about Noah Clowney, about Zaire Williams, Nicholas Claxton, Jalen Wilson, all these other guys tomorrow before the Nets get back on the court on Wednesday night against Denver. I'm not doing it quickly to gloss over it, but we've had this conversation before. It's about Ben Simmons, and it's about how bad he is. Now, here's the real problem. Even beyond him being bad. One, when you come out of a game where Jordi Fernandez says, I want him taking 15 shots a game coming out of Orlando, and he turns around and takes his fewest attempts so far this season, which is hard to do because he only had 4 and 5 previously, only takes 3 shots in this game, plays 24 minutes, played to a -9 in this game. But I'll go even a step further. Remember, over the last couple of seasons, we talked about how, Ben Simmons would be the perfect kind of player to have on the court with Cam Thomas. Well, guess what? When these two guys share the court, 65 minutes, a -25 on the season right now. Disastrous at both ends of the court in terms of ratings. I'm not here to drag Ben Simmons, but he's the only thing that isn't fun, that doesn't look good. And that's where I was going to go. And this is it. It's done. Like every journey, and we it's not like we ever sat here and held up false hope around what he was going to come back and be from this surgery. But it's it. It's over. It's done. This is the end of the journey for Ben Simmons. Yeah. And if he starts on Wednesday night, we would both be shocked if Jordi Fernandez makes that choice.
Look, we're not going to do it's at the very end of the episode. We're going to throw it in here. We're going to talk next episode about Claxton, Zaire Williams, and Clowney, and just like how absolutely sick that three-man is, because that deserves its own thing. It's over. It's a mental block. I feel bad. It sucks. It's the worst place to be. He had 2 alarming disqualifying plays in this game that make it so that you can't play. He can't do it. One was he passed up a lob attempt. He had a lob where he just didn't even try. Now you want to say, it was like thrown behind him a little bit. He did not even look at the rim. He was going up for it, and he literally passed a lob attempt as he was getting it to Cam Johnson. And then the worst one was they get the steal and they're on the 2-on-1, 3-on-1 fast break. And he stops at the point. He stops at the 3-point line because he sees that it's just him and I think it was Giannis, which again is intimidating. And he just kind of slowly goes into Giannis and bails out and passes it, and the ball just like ricochets off. That was the one where it's like, it's in his head, and it's in his head, and it's horrible. And you hate to see it. You hate when someone has the yips, the Rick Ankiel, Chuck Knobloch thing where you can no longer throw it to the place you've thrown your whole life.
Yep.
But when it happens, it's a mental thing. He doesn't want to shoot. He does not want to go to the basket for whatever reason. He doesn't want to shoot. And it's just, you can't start him. They have to start Claxton next game. Like they just can't. Yep. It's not helping anybody. It doesn't help anybody. Like, and it helps anybody.
It's hurting people as well. Like, it's to the detriment of other players on the court too.
And he's got great. And you know what I said too? God,
I'm going to say this really quickly because I know there were 4 passes in the first quarter and a half that were to wide open players. And if they went down, those assist numbers get counted. And it does have value. It does mean something. So I know you're about to say, it's like, he looks well.
I'm telling you right now, physically, I said this, physically, he looks pretty good. Like, he looks pretty good. His vision is still completely there. He has great vision. He's actually playing, I think, okay defense, pretty okay / good defensively. He's doing all this stuff that is like actually physically. I actually think he's probably, they weren't lying when they said, like his trainer said, in the offseason, he's back physically. I think that's the truth. What they did not account for, was that it's not a physical problem. It's not a physical problem. Mentally, he does not want to shoot. That last play on that breakaway, that's the defining moment for him. It's a defining moment. He can't do the thing that you have to be able to do if you play in the NBA when you're 6'10", or really any size, is you have to be able to want to dribble the ball and go toward the basket. It's the whole thing. It's the whole game. It's like what you grew up doing. The whole game is dribble the ball and go to the basket. And he just doesn't want to do it, even when it's optimal. And you could see it. Right when he got the ball, he stopped. Yep. And it wasn't because of Giannis. It was because he looked at the basket, and it was going to be a little difficult to get there.
Yep.
And it might look bad. And he just did this thing, which when you can see it and the players do it, it's a mental thing. He does not want to do it. It's sad. It sucks. But you can't start him. They got to start Claxton next game.
That's it for me. No, I agree with you 100%. We'll see what it looks like. And obviously, if Jordy Fernandez is going to maintain the mentality that he's trying to instill in this team, that's why there's no way that Ben Simmons can remain in the starting lineup or have a consistent role, because it would, frankly, be disrespectful to the rest of the players that are all trying to do the things that are being asked of them on a night in, night out basis. And you have one guy, as sad as it may be, who just cannot pull the trigger on what feel like wide open shots. But the Nets did win this game 115-102, and we'll talk about that Zaire Williams, Nicholas Claxton, Noah Clowney combination. That does have me a little bit excited when you get those sample sizes on the court. We'll do that tomorrow.
All right, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen. Make sure you head wherever you listen to podcasts, over on YouTube as well. Go to WeGotNets.com. 4 days, 4 stories. No Ben Simmons stories in there. Jordy Fernandez, Cam Thomas, Noah Clowney, the draft picks. It's all there, still relevant. Get you started in the season, carry all the way through. WeGotNets.com.
Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Now that's Baby Ruth, care of the Sandlot.
One of the all-time great group of poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.